very much for joining us for this information-filled session. We're going to start with introduction of our presenters, our panelists, our experts today, and then we'll hop right into the meat of this session. And what I'll do is I will start with Wendy V. Wendy V, and we'll go around the virtual room and have you introduce yourselves to our viewers.
Hello, everybody. My name is Wendy Vavrisek, and I am the Elementary EC Director for Durham Public Schools.
Dr. Bell.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kristen Bell, and I am the Executive Director for the Exceptional Children's Department.
Karen.
Hi, my name is Karen Lachlan. I'm a parent educator with ECAC. That's the Exceptional Children's Assistance Center, and we serve the entire state of North Carolina. Always happy to be here with the Durham folks.
Okay. We've all met Ms. Porter, and how about Ms. Krista?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Krista Saunders. I'm the EC Director of Special Programs and Behavior Support.
Okay. Stacy.
Hi, I'm Stacy Burns, and I'm the EC Director for Secondary Schools.
And Sarah.
Hi, this is Sarah Harlan. I'm the DSNAC Communications Chair.
Perfect. And I think Tosh.
Good afternoon. I'm Tosh Adams. I am the Vice Chair of DSNAC.
Thank you so very much. We're going to hop right into the questions for the panel. And Dr. Bell, we'll put you on the hot seat first, and we'll get kicked off with this first question. How do I find out about my rights and responsibilities in special education? Dr. Bell.
Yeah, great lead question. Parental rights and responsibilities are actually, it's a document and a pamphlet, a handout created by the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, the EC Division, and it's posted on their website. It's also posted on our website. There's a version in English and Spanish, and it's a very helpful, important document for parents that outlines a lot of critical information to help them understand what their rights and responsibilities are. Beyond just having access to that document, we strongly encourage parents to ask questions because a lot of, even though it's in parent-friendly language, there's still a lot of complex information in there. And especially if you're new and sometimes not so new to the process, there are so many questions that parents have due to the complexities, and especially about, how does all of this apply to my child? So we encourage parents to make sure that they reach out at the school level to the school administrator, an exceptional children's teacher. We have EC facilitators at the school, and definitely our department, our central office department, the team here today. We are happy to always walk parents through any aspect or all and answer any questions that they have at any point in time. So typically parents would receive that before any IEP meeting. We ask our folks to provide it during or before every IEP meeting, although it's legally required under certain situations. But also should be, when it's being offered, we should be asking parents, do you have any questions? Can we help you walk through any aspects of the booklet or any pieces that we can help you understand, not just hand it to the parent. I also ask any, my colleagues here, Karen, if there's any other information that you would add to that.
Yeah, so I'll be talking a bit about ECAC in the specific ways we help, but we are an outside agency, a nonprofit that serves the whole state, as I said, and you can always ask us specific questions or look on our website for information. And I think what Dr. Bell said a good point is you can read the book, but sometimes you want to talk to somebody about, well, what does it really mean? What does that look like for real? And that's, I think, a role that we can help with. We do webinars on the topic, and we can take specific questions, about your situation.
Thank you for that information and for your accessibility. And having said that, our second question deals with rights as a parent if they do not agree, if someone does not agree with recommendations made by someone on the IEP team, such as the teacher, the EC specialist, a psychologist. An example might be that the school recommends mainstream, and the caregiver strongly believes that separate setting is better for the youth. How does a parent address these concerns and with whom? Wendy, can you take that question for us?
Yes. So obviously in an IEP team, we see it as a team, which includes the parent. And the goal of any team is to reach consensus, meaning full agreement with everybody. At times, there are reasons that, of course, would be very specific to that particular case and child as to why maybe that maybe there isn't consensus, and the parent wants something that the other team members feel like is not what we are obligated to do, which is provide a free, appropriate public education. So in our goal of providing FAPE, meaning the IEP, there might not be full agreement on that. And perhaps it's because the parent feels like it's in a safer environment, if it's a smaller classroom before, but because of the child's functioning and the goals that we have for the child as far as being out, which is the legal requirement of the law, right, is to be with their non-disabled peers to the greatest extent possible, the least restrictive environment. So we understand there can be anxiety if a child has been in a smaller setting, but we're trying to move them out. Typically, we work to do that in moderation. And with all the appropriate data. So that would include, like, what is all of their functioning about? So the team should consider all of that information when making a decision. And the goal is to have agreement by everybody. On occasion, there is not agreement. And as far as some of those specific players, the psychologist, of course, we want the parent's voice heard and recognized in the record. So that should be accounted for if they're in disagreement with somebody's statements or something to that effect. That would be reflected in the minutes, and perhaps a closing document that we call the prior written notice, which is a summary of decisions made in that meeting. But in the event, sometimes we don't have consensus and we can't ever get there. I've seen some teams take a pause and come back maybe a day later and reconvene after some time, but not too long. And then ultimately, if they don't reach that consensus, that is where under the law, the individual serving as what's called the LEA or local education agency representative for that meeting, in this case, should be an administrator of the school building. So principal, assistant principal for Durham Public Schools. That is the expectation currently, that any one of those administrators will be serving in that role. Then they would make an ultimate decision. And so they would take all of the data and information that has been discussed and make a determination on behalf of the team. So that is where there is a decision made by someone that might be perhaps against what the parent wants or might be against other team members. The goal is to obviously make the decision, the most informed decision in the best interest of the child. And so that is kind of how that process comes down. And I will yield to other panel members who might have some additional input.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I would just add a little bit. I think, sorry, Karen, I got you next.
Go ahead.
I think Wendy was talking about that. There's the really critical importance of teams using data, really current and relevant data to make decisions for students, and that it's our obligation to make sure that we do a really good job of helping parents and other team members understand the data that should be the basis of our decisions. That often helps when we're using data, and also that whole least restrictive environment approach when it comes to placement for students. We really work with our teams to understand, always considering the general education classroom first for every child to see what kind of supports a student may need. Is that the least restrictive for the child environment for the child? As we might have to move along the continuum to more restrictiveness. And sometimes I think it's just, there is disagreement, but sometimes I think parents, have we done a good job of it really explaining why we think this is the LRE for a student using the data? Karen.
Yeah, ECAC, we made a video a couple years ago about navigating conflict in special education, and you could see it from our website. And it really starts by saying it's so natural that there would be conflict and disagreement because you have a whole range of IEP team members, one or more of whom is parents, and have a different perspective, different set of emotions. You have this discussion of data, you have all kinds of experts with different opinions. So why wouldn't there be disagreements at times? And so it doesn't have to be a bad thing. There's also some strategies on there that, to try to understand the nature of your particular conflict, which can really make a difference, and some communication strategies. So check that out if you, as a parent, you're thinking, well, maybe I'm going to have a disagreement coming up, or I have had a recent disagreement. And then the video ends with a set of options provided under federal special ed law and from the state. If you just straight up can't live with a decision, you feel that you need to pursue it at a higher level, the parents have rights to do that. And they're not all real contentious or argumentative or expensive. Some of them are pretty simple. And sometimes it's just about waiting and seeing how things go, and having another meeting in a little while and seeing what, as Dr. Bell said, data, what does the data say about the decisions that were made and how they're working? So we like to say to parents, it's never over. You don't just, have to be unhappy about things. You have options, and you have places to go for more information about those.
Thank you so much. And I think the key word here is advocate, because this is a team approach, and there are partnerships, as Ms. Lachlan has shared about the ECAC. She's also shared in our chat, the website for her organization. So I'll share that with you right now. That's www.ecac-parentcenter.org. www.ecac-parentcenter.org. Thank you so very much for these answers thus far. I'm going to move to Stacy and ask a question about ask a question on behalf of parents who feel that perhaps maybe the child's IEP is not being followed. So what does a parent do, and how does a parent advocate for their child if the school insists that they are in fact following the IEP? Stacy.
Great question. So first and foremost, I would start with the case manager. The case manager is responsible to make sure that IEP is followed from cover to cover. So part of that process is once the IEP meeting is over and there's a understanding and agreement, that case manager is to review that document with the teachers so they are aware what's in the document and what is exactly supposed to happen and answer questions. Then that document is distributed to the teachers. They leave with a copy. They understand what accommodations should be happening in what class and when. The IEP goals, they are to provide direct instruction, right? Special design instruction, whether it be inclusion and resource. Teachers should be having a service verification log where they're documenting the time that the child was in the classroom, how long, what goals were addressed during that time, what accommodations were provided during that time, even in a general ed setting, what accommodations were provided during that time. They keep a log of that. So we have data notebooks where that data is supposed to be input into the data notebook. It graphs it for you so you can see whether or not the child is making progress or not. And so therefore, if a parent was to come and say, I do not believe that you are following my child's IEP, the teacher should offer that information to the parent, whether that be, we're in the age of Zoom. So let's jump on a quick Zoom, invite them in for a conference and have them come in and review the information and show them that data notebook where the child is receiving, here's the data, here's what we tracked so far, here's how I provided him the services, what area, what time, here are the accommodations that are being provided to him. Here's the examples of those accommodations that we have provided. Here's some hard copies of the data points that are in this data notebook. That will help a parent understand that, yes, the IEP is being followed. So the second part of that is, so I guess it's like, so they're telling me all of this, I still don't believe it, right? Then at that point, I would recommend, if you didn't get an answer from the case manager, seeking that assistance from the principal. The principal is the LEA of the building. They are to ensure that that IEP is being implemented. So that can go one or two ways. You could have a conversation with the principal and teacher, or you can reconvene the IEP team. I always err on reconvening the IEP team with the team members. So then that way everyone could speak to what they're doing, show their data, show the information that they're providing, talk about how the student is making progress in the general ed curriculum. Here's the data. And that way the full team can answer the parents' questions. So that way they can rest assured that this is happening. And I would recommend, and we all do as a team when we're in various meetings, if we have parents that maybe are unsure, right? Like I like this IEP, but I'm not really sure. We should set a date to come back for the team to reconvene to make sure that the IEP is actually effective.
Thank you so
I
much.
always,
Oh,
I
I'm
always
sorry,
have,
Katie.
have something because I hear so many stories on the phone. And I would say, despite best intentions, what we're hearing a lot is there's so much staff turnover and substitutes and such that it is sometimes unclear that everybody that needs to know enough about the IEP does know that stuff. So I would suggest to parents that if you're hearing that the teacher just left, or we have a new sub coming, but it's going to be 3 temporary subs before that person's ready, those sorts of things are unavoidable apparently right now. That you do some proactive, maybe some emailing, or use your class dojo, whatever's available, to just say, hey, it's me, heads up. I understand you're just going to be here a few days. I want to be sure you know about the IEP. Here's who the case manager is. If you have questions, or please let me know. Or, you just do some proactive things, little check-ins, because we are in an era right now that is unfortunate, where staff shortages is a reality, and a lot of transition is, day to day, week to week, we're not always sure who's going to be there. So that's just something parents can kind of keep track of and get ahead of a little bit.
That's great advice, Karen. I would add, kind of like Stacy said, sometimes it's a parent-teacher conference, and sometimes it needs to be the full IEP team to make it more formal. A lot of situations where the parents just meeting with the EC teacher and getting questions answered and getting the information they need, and that suffices. There's no proposed changes to the plan. But that's always a good next step, is to request, the parent can request at any time an IEP meeting. I would also say asking for not just the data, but samples of the student's work that support the data is always helpful, and it also helps contextualize the data points. So you can actually see writing samples, you can see materials that the student is reading and at what grade level, you can see mathematics problems. And then the final thing is definitely having, regardless of the student's age, I think a copy of their schedule, and having a good understanding of when those EC and or related services are occurring over the student's day, so that they've got that visual schedule. They know that if it says 5 times a week, 30 minutes for reading, it's happening Monday through Friday, and what times of the day, by whom. Same thing with if a student receives any related services like speech and OT, when are those being provided? That helps kind of back up when you get the data to see that the service delivery should be matching up with what's on that student schedule.
Thank you so very much. And those are valid points in terms of maybe a procedure that's not being followed. Sometimes, or most times, there should be a reason, a good reason why something maybe has been overlooked, or so we'll continue with that. And Wendy or Stacy, what steps do I take if an evaluation request has been submitted and the school has not responded within the required time frame? Either one of you.
I'll give it a go first. So first of all, what I would say is for parents is, one, we want to always make sure that you are making a request. If it's specifically that you're asking for an evaluation, we would ask that you make that request in writing. There are two specific people at any school to submit that to outside of like myself or Stacy or Dr. Bell, and that would be the respective administrator, school principal or assistant principal, and the respective EC facilitator. So either one of those people would be who we would want written requests to go to. On occasion, we have requests go to teachers. When we say we work with our facilitators, make sure that they communicate to all staff in the building. When those requests come, they need to be presented to the facilitator because we have a responsibility to act on those in a timely manner. If there's sometimes parents have conversations, and sometimes then we don't know like who the conversations were. The parent doesn't have a name, so that's why the written documentation is really critical. But if a parent believes that they've submitted that and it went to the right person and they haven't heard, then we would say they should be reaching out to speak with either the administrator or the facilitator. If they are feeling like they're not getting a response in that 24 to 48 hour window of the contact, then I would say they probably should reach out to myself or Stacy at that point, so that we can help make sure that they're getting connected. Likewise, staffing, we have facilitators covering several schools in some cases. No facilitator is assigned to just one school, so they may not be in a particular school. For example, if it's presented in a written format that didn't come to them. So there could be, a couple days, but I feel like this question might be at something that's been, weeks or months perhaps. And so I think it's always worthy of checking out. I don't think anyone would intentionally disregard a parent's request. So I'm going to err on the side that something happened. Or perhaps a staff member left who was in receipt of that and it didn't get channeled to the right location. Nonetheless, we still have a responsibility and the timeline was initiated with their request. So we would need to act quickly and as responsibly as possible to do that. I'll leave that for anyone else to follow up if they have other things.
Stacy, did you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
No, just the fact that I would say make sure that you get a copy of the letter back. So when you submit the letter, ask the person, could they make a copy of the letter and hand back to you? So you have there's, if it gets lost or whatever, or someone, you can follow up and say, I submitted this letter on this day. So I would always recommend parents get a copy of their letter.
An email it serves as written communication too, and of course that's time and date stamp, so that works.
Right.
I think just also a point of reference, sometimes I've seen handwritten letters, which is perfectly appropriate, but sometimes parents haven't indicated a date. So I would ask the parent to note the date that they are handing that to, and then we likewise tell our staff to note the date received, so that we know what date we were informed of the request. That actually triggers legally the 90-day obligation. So we have 90 days to act on that request. That action does mean holding a referral meeting. However, at that time, that's when the team determines the next steps as to whether or not there will be an evaluation that moves forward, or if not. And those are all conversations within the context of that IEP meeting.
And we have 90 days to evaluate, and if found eligible, develop an IEP.
Right.
So want to make that very clear. Like, it's not 90 days just to evaluate, but 90 days to evaluate and develop an IEP. There was a question in the chat by Ms. Porter about that, but exceptional children facilitator. You can obtain that information from our office, or you can go directly to the school and they should be able to let you know the facilitator's name and the days that they are actually in the building and their contact information.
One last point of clarification. If a parent is, for whatever reason, unable to put that request in writing, they can ask for help in doing so from staff at the building. So again, that's where in making that request to the administrator or to the school, to the EC facilitator, they're feeling like they are challenged in some way to do that in writing. We have an obligation to help support that.
And one thing else I want to add on this, because I'm just, as Wendy's talking, I'm thinking of things, and I'm sure vice versa. But also, when we have those evaluation reports, something we do in Durham Public Schools is that we offer, every evaluator is to offer a time to the parent to review those evaluations before the meeting. So they understand it, they can ask whatever questions, they can digest it. So when it comes down to the eligibility meeting, they understand what the team is talking about and they can meaningfully participate within that meeting.
This is amazing to me. I think it's wonderful. And I strongly encourage families to either, you can meet with some school staff to go over that ahead of time. It's really, really hard to listen to a description of a report if you're not familiar with that stuff. You can also call ECAC. Our parent educators are not psychologists or special educators, but we can look at reports and kind of help walk you through it and help you. And it's maybe possibly a little safer environment because, we're other parents and you could have just a one-on-one as opposed to, some other kind of group ways. So I really encourage that. The first IEP meeting I ever went to for my daughter, it was well-intentioned, but they read the report word for over 2 hours. And I don't hear that happening in Durham, but you don't want to do that. And you don't want that to be the moment where you're processing, like, what did that score mean? And what did they say? And what do they mean my child is like this and like that? It can be very difficult. So take them up on that offer or ask us to help you go through that information.
Thank you so much, Karen. Dr. Bell, did you have something else that you wanted to add?
Just a brief, to reiterate the importance of why we do that, like Stacy said and Karen said, to help parents have some more confidential private time, even though it may not necessarily be that with you. I love that ECAC offers that too, because where is that parent's comfort zone? They're hearing so much private information that's so sensitive about their child. And then you go into this IEP meeting with a bunch of people that you may know a little bit, but you don't know, and they're hearing that too. Like we have to understand the vulnerabilities there and how that have like an empathic approach to that. So by allowing parents that opportunity and really encouraging that, we want them to, one, have that time to process the information, and also in an environment like Karen and Stacy said, that is hopefully as safe as possible for the parent. And then when they're going into the full IEP meeting, it might be summarized more, but they've had that time to cognitively, psychologically, emotionally prepare and process.
Great information. And we're about at the halfway mark, and this has been such a robust conversation. One of the things that I'd like to ask is if there are personal concerns, individual personal concerns that need to be addressed offline. I know this is a Facebook Live, opportunity to share with your parents in the community, but tell us who and where to call if there is a particular personal situation that a parent would like to cover. Dr. Bell, would you like to take that one, or Stacy? I see Stacy, you turned on your mic.
Yeah, Stacy, you were on mic, and go ahead.
So I would always say, start with the people you're most familiar with, which is your routine. If you don't get resolved there, we always encourage you to, and when I talk about school team, make sure like the facilitator is a part of that, who can explain some of that, language, legal language, like the IEP piece, the evaluation piece. But start with the team that you're familiar with, which is the school. If you cannot find resolve there, please reach out to your prospective director. So if it's elementary, it'd be Wendy. If it's middle or high school, it would be me. If it's special programs, it would be Krista. And you could always, reach out to Dr. Bell as well. But we like to be able to have the opportunity to make sure that we take care of families, we take care of children. They trust us with their children. They're there all day and they're not there with them. So we want to make sure that when they drop them off, put them on the bus or whatever, that they know that they're going to be taken care of, which we do a wonderful job at doing. But if there's ever that concern, we want to make sure that, I always say IEP is like a family. So we want to make sure that we're taking care of our family member, right? The same way you would do any other family member. And then if not, you always go, the next step. What's the next step? District office. And then we can always resolve it there. And we do a pretty good job doing that as a team.
That's excellent. Thank you so much for that. Dr. Bell, what's the process for filing a grievance or a complaint?
Well, first of all, we would do everything we can to hope that it doesn't come to that. That's our goal. That some of those things that we've talked about so far today, that parents know how to hopefully navigate the process and are starting, with the school team, the teacher, the principal. The hope is that issues get resolved there, and with through IEP processes. Like Karen said before, there will be bumps in the road and we won't always agree, and that's okay. Though we give a lot of effort to try to come to agreement. At that point, like Stacy said, our office, we spend a lot of time where there is some conflict, where parents will reach out to us. And I do agree. I think we do a great job of really trying to resolve those issues. Like your local dispute resolution here, the EC department in Durham Public Schools. That's what we do. We do a lot of other things, but we spend a lot of time on that. And we want to hear from you. Sometimes we can help resolve those situations and sometimes we can't. Most of the times we can, and we will. If you're not satisfied at the local level, you can contact the State Department, NCDPI, North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, and the Exceptional Children's Division there has a whole dispute resolution department. You can start with a phone call to them. They're really helpful. You can explain your situation. They can give some guidance over the phone. You can also, of course, we don't want it to come to this, but you can do this as a parent. You can file formal state complaints. There's a process for that the DPI folks could help you. And that's something that you would outline your concern. It would go to the State Department and they would follow up with the district and ask for documentation and investigate it and see if there is something that needs to be corrected there. There is also facilitation. We've had some really great results where we've requested facilitation from DPI when they will assign a neutral party to help us get through an IEP meeting and kind of navigate it and facilitate it. I have really good experiences with that. Either the district or the parent can request that. We've had both. There's also mediation, where it's another neutral trained person to come in and assist the IEP team. And then the last on the rung that I would say is for a parent to file a due process petition, which is essentially filing a lawsuit. We definitely don't want that to happen. We do feel strongly that we can resolve complaints here within the district, but parents do have a right to do that. And that's something that DPI can help out. There's specific forms. Sometimes parents do that on their own, and sometimes they will access advocates or attorneys to assist them. I can't say enough. If parents are feeling that way, we would hope that you would reach out. We would encourage you to. You don't have to, but to reach out to our department to see if we can assist you before you go that path, if at all possible.
Dr. Bell, thank you so much for being so forthright with that information. And of course, one of the goals of today's session is to provide all of the information that you need so that you can advocate along with us for your child. Krista, I want to turn to you now and ask about parent expectations, because again, we want the parent front and center with the student. So what is expected of me as a parent during the IEP process? And then what is expected of the school during the IEP process?
Yeah, that's a great question. The parent is a member of the IEP team, and we want the parent to be an active member. We value the parent's feedback. They know their child best. So participating in IEP meetings, certainly bringing concerns to the table that we can address upfront and clearly. The IEP process is ever going, right? We can always meet to review IEPs, amend IEPs. So part of the school team's obligation is implementing that IEP and being able to show you as a parent documentation of that implementation, being able to share the data that's been discussed earlier, being able to show where your student is making progress, where maybe progress is not being made. And then it's our obligation at that point to talk about what we're going to do differently. Are we going to change our instructional approach? Are we going to use another strategy and intervention? So having those conversations ongoing with the parent and having that active participation throughout the process is really, really important.
So what I heard was that this is not just another meeting where a parent has been invited. What I heard you say at the very top of your remarks was that parents are members of this team. And that's powerful. That is very powerful. I've got two questions for Ms. Lachlan here, and I don't think we have any questions from Facebook Live or from the Zoom at this point. But that first question, Karen, is how does ECAC support families during the IEP process, including education on the different steps, documents, requirements, and expectation of the school and the parent? And you may have touched on this already, but then what does ECAC offer in terms of teaching advocacy to parents?
Okay, thank you for asking. And it kind of builds off of what Krista just said. Parents are IEP team members, and they're also experts in their children. They are not always experts in the language and the processes and the rules and all the words, the how to talk about the data, all that stuff. So our agency is actually funded through special education law to help parents better understand all that stuff, among other things, but a lot of it is about understanding special education and participating in a really meaningful way. So we do that. We try to share information, all the different ways people might want to receive it. So we have our website, and I gave that address. And on there, you can search for resources in all different categories related to special education or IEPs, specific disability types, specific ages of your kids, because really, some of this for some children is a journey that starts at birth and it lasts, till they leave high school and even into young adulthood. So we cover all those ages with information sheets that you can read or print or whatever you'd like. We do webinars and in-person workshops. So we cover a lot of the key topics pretty regularly. And then we'll do specialized topics at different times of the year, or as, for example, COVID, we had to do a lot of different things about remote learning and things like that. At that time, we try to be real responsive. So webinars, in-person workshops, you can learn about all this from our social media, or from the website. If you want to get on our mailing list, you can go to our website and do that, and then you'll receive information about webinars and trainings that we're doing. Just for example, I'm going to do two myself, and I'm just, one staff member, but I'm going to talk about effective IEP meetings, how to prepare for them, and how to kind of, what do I say in them? How do I act in them? And I'm going to cover the video that I mentioned earlier about conflict in special education, how to navigate that. So we're going to go do a deeper dive into that content. That's just a couple examples, because like I said, I'm only one, but we have lots of our staff. We do newsletters. We push it out in all the different ways we know how. We take a lot of phone calls and emails, a lot of that. Sometimes that breaks down by age group, but whatever your preference. We're even doing lots of texting back and forth these days. because that's where we can talk about the individual, learn about the child, learn about the family's priorities for their child. You know, every family's different. What they're looking for their child depends on a lot of things. And we do what I like that I think we're really good at is helping people find the words and get the thoughts organized and focused and kind of really just break it down into, if this is what you want, here's how you might say it. And here's if you hear these things, that might be what they mean. And here's how you might respond, and kind of really breaking it down so that parents can anticipate what a meeting might be like, feel really ready. The last call I did right before we met for this was ended by the mom saying, well, thank you, because I took notes and now I feel prepared and I think I might cry less. And that's always a good thing, right? For parents to want to cry less in meetings. And the reality is they do, and it can be very emotional, and it could be scary. It can be a lot of things. So we are there for parents. We'll send and, interact with parents any way they want to let us into their lives. We are all parents, by the way, of kids with disabilities ourselves. One of the requirements is through our grant funding is that be true. So we've been there, if not on the same journey, on a similar one to the people that we're talking with. So that and advocacy, all that is as advocacy. Everything you learn allows you to represent your child, speak up for them, which is what we want, what parents want, and be able to do effectively.
So Karen, from the standpoint of advocacy, I've heard you talk about advocacy as well as voice. What specifically are two pieces of advice that you would give to a parent as they navigate the IEP or the Exceptional Children's Program process?
I've given this a lot of thought for years and years, so it's just wonderful I get to say it. The first thing is believe the thing about you are an expert in your child and that you have a very important role in their education. Just really embrace that, believe it, believe in yourself, and fill in any gaps of information that will allow you to do that really effectively. You've heard a lot of words here today, right? A lot of talk of data and interventions and systems and processes and IEPs, and I don't even get me started on all the words that go with IEPs. So if you need to know more about that, let us help you do that. Let your staff help you do that. And don't try to do it necessarily alone. Let some people in and let them share what they know. The second part is I've kind of alluded to throughout. Be prepared. IEP meeting is not going to be just something to show up for. There's too much on the line. It's just too weird. It's like you're entering another universe. So you got to be prepared, and you want to be able to review how things have been going, get a sense of your concerns, your priorities for the next possibly whole year. If you're only meeting once a year, but you can meet more. Talk with your child if they're able to communicate with you about how they're going, and get really grounded around a vision. They ask a question, it goes by kind of quick. What's your vision for your child's future? And if without a lot of thought, you might just say a few words and you've missed an opportunity if you do that, because your vision for your child's future and their vision when they're of a certain age grounds everything. And the responsibility, especially as your child gets into high school and gets close to graduation, the job of special education is to help prepare for the future. So don't miss that opportunity to really think about, where is my child's life going? What do they want? What do we see? What's important to us as a family? And make sure you're talking about those things, and that the special education program, so you can't, in my point, I'm digressing a little because I have so many thoughts about all of it, but point being, if you're prepared, you won't miss those moments where somebody asks you a question, you'll be able to have a really solid answer, and that will matter. That really does matter, because you're not just another person at the table, you're a really key member of your child's IEP team.
Thank you so much. I believe that we've come to the end of our questions, but before I pitch to Ms. Porter to wrap us up, I would like to offer the panel any closing, remarks or anything that they'd like to share with those who have signed on with us today. Dr. Bell, I'll start with you.
I was thinking, Karen, I love your advice. I've been doing this for 29 years too, so there's probably lots that I would say. I think one common thing I hear from parents that's kind of heartbreaking is when they apologize, like they're apologetic for speaking up or asking questions. And I would say as much as you're able to kind of think about that as a parent, and you don't need to apologize for anything. Like Karen, reiterating what Karen said, you are an important member of the team. You know your child best. You have a voice, and your voice is powerful. So don't ever feel the need to apologize for being an advocate and a strong voice for your child.
Wendy, I saw you had opened up your mic.
I think the only thing I was going to add to that, which was actually on the heels of Karen, was we are imploring our staff when they are preparing a draft IEP or preparing draft documents and need parent input. It is our expectation that they are reaching out ahead of a meeting to obtain the questions that are part of that document. Every time they have to go through it, we want to know what are the parent concerns and what are the parent vision. And we keep saying, don't cold call your parent in the meeting for that information for the first time. Be asking ahead of time. And so to that end, I don't know that all parents are getting asked ahead of time. And so we'll continue to speak and preach that again, perhaps maybe this afternoon in our chat with our staff. But also to that end, that if they do reach out to get that information from you, and you're able to do it by email, or you're able to take some moments on the phone and provide that, or you want to schedule a call back to give them that information, we would encourage you to do that and not wait until during the meeting. You know, those meetings can be emotional, they can be lengthy, there's a lot to talk about. It doesn't mean you can't change or rephrase something that you give them ahead of time. We can rephrase that. But if we have the context of that information as part of the draft, that when we start the meeting, we can review it and see if that is still a good reflection of their concerns and vision presently. It's helpful to not ask them right off the bat to just spin their concerns and vision off the top of their head. So it is our expectation that we respect parents' opportunity to think through those questions, think deeply, and be able to provide that information in a more thoughtful way.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Taj, Krista, Stacy, anyone? Karen, want to make any final remarks before Ms. Porter?
I can always say more, because this is, near and dear, and I know it is to you all too. The parent concern phrase, I think, is an interesting way they even put that. On an IEP, it says, what are the parent concerns, if any? And it almost sounds like you would need to complain in some kind of weird way. So I would like to say that every parent has an opportunity to just share what's on their mind. It doesn't have to be a complaint, and it's really okay to and desirable. IEP team members want to know what you're thinking. They want to know what you're seeing, what's important to you. And so really use that to your advantage. You can write something and you can ask that your very same words go on the form, and they become part of the basis of discussion. So it really is important, and it does matter. If you don't like, the word concern, you could say, here's what we've been thinking about. We've been wondering this. We want to know a little bit more about that. We'd like to see this in the future, so it's just a chance to share what you're thinking. And I greatly appreciate the mention that the schools are reaching out to parents early so they can really use that effectively. I think that's wonderful.
I'll just add that no question is too big or too small, and no question is too early to ask. So I think sometimes we think for the short term, and we're looking at how are we supporting your child today, tomorrow, and in the next 10 years or 15 years, and where do you want them to be? So I think the sooner families know about resources available in the school and the community, the better we can plan for what that future looks like and better prepare students and families for that. Because a lot of parents, I think, don't always know what the options are, what's going to be the option in middle school, high school, and beyond. And it's never too soon to start talking about those things. So I think that's another thought that I just had.
Now, I would just add, being at the middle and high school level, parents really talk to your children, teachers, school staff talk to the students, right? Get their input, because you're saying, hey, Johnny needs this, and nobody's consulted Johnny on that. So we want them to be advocates for themselves. It's not when they leave school, it's while they're in school. We build skills in school so we can lead our post-secondary life after school. So to what Krista said about it's not too early, right? We should be developing IEPs. If it's in kindergarten, we should be developing IEPs with the end in mind. Like, what these skills that I teach them today, how can I build upon those skills? So we should never write an IEP. Although we write an IEP for a year, we should be writing an IEP that has the stepping stones to the future.
Thank you so very much to the panel. It's been an honor being your moderator. And Ms. Porter, I will pitch it to you.
Okay. Thank you, Crystal. Done a great job as always. And thank you, panel, for all of the great tips and information that you shared with our listeners today. Lots of great information as always to help our parents navigate special education. And Wendy, I will tell you, I recently had an IEP meeting, and yes, I was contacted early on to review things, and that did give me a time to be able to answer those types of questions. Karen, to your point, what would I like to see, for my child in the future? So, because you get that on the spot and you can't really answer that. So it gave me some time to really think about that prior to that. So thank you all. So some of these things have been happening, and I am seeing some of them come to fruition with my own child. I think lastly, I would like to state, Karen, I love the last thing you said. Believe in yourself, parents. Believe in yourselves. I think that's a great motto. Believing in yourselves, that you have your key part and an instrumental part to your child's education, whether it's general ed or special education. And so you're a key member of this IEP team. It took me several years to really feel comfortable in that space. So I'm hopeful that parents will listen to these sessions, even replay this session to be able to get the confidence and gain that confidence that they need to be that advocate for their child and be confident and comfortable with asking questions, even if they're may sound maybe not, people say there's no dumb question. I ask all questions because now I feel comfortable in that space. So thank you all again for all of your prep work and things that you've done today. And we'll be back next month with a different session. So have a great afternoon, and we will see you again in February. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.